Yo, man, Still Mills, what's the deal, man? Fresh off the clock, dropping the homie off at his little family function, man. But peep game, this topic was pretty hot on Facebook last night, or just on social media, and it was the topic of, can Canelo Alvarez in his prime be the prime Floyd Mayweather, man? And when you break it down, the first thing people do is jump to the fact that, oh man, Canelo wouldn't be where he is if it wasn't for Floyd beating him, which is true. Only a fool would argue that. Only a fool would argue that, man. Even I was watching DT3 the Boom Man. Shout out to him. I was watching his film breakdown on between Floyd and Canelo, and Floyd and Erislandy Lara, and he learned a lot from that Floyd fight when he went in there and he stepped in the ring with Lara. He was a lot more cognizant, so he was a lot sharper in there, a lot more poised when he fought Lara than he was with Floyd. Floyd and Lara are two completely different styles, but nonetheless, not too different, but different. They have their similarities. But what people fail to realize is Floyd at his best is 147, 154. We'll say the Floyd that fought Canelo, because that was a cerebral Floyd. That was a very cerebral Floyd. Very cerebral. Versus the Canelo that we've been seeing. I think if Canelo does what we're expecting him to do, we won't even do that. We'll say the Canelo that fought Golovkin. Because he felt no resistance with Callum Smith. It was no resistance offered with Callum Smith. He just sat there and it was nothing Callum Smith could do with him. But with Golovkin, he came across a lot of resistance, and it forced him to, be calculated in his attack. First of all, what we have to realize is, even though that was at 60, could we even say that? Because I'm talking prime Canelo, and it's looking like prime Canelo is in. I think the version that we're getting of Canelo now is the 168 version, but I think the best performance we've got from Canelo was the Canelo that fought Golovkin. That Canelo was just that Canelo was ridiculous. So, are we back on? Damn. But I think like I said, the best version of Canelo we got was with Golovkin, but the best performance we got from Canelo was with Golovkin. The best version of Canelo, I think, is at 160. So, or not 160, but 168. So, for one, it's a lot of things that factor into it. Where would they meet at? Canelo's not going back. He damn sure ain't going back to no 154. And even when they fought, Floyd put a catch weight on him. You dig? And he was able to make that catch weight a lot more comfortably back then. He wasn't even, he wasn't filled out like a grown man. Now he's a lot more filled out. He's bulky. You just see he's like a bulldog in there now. Where are they gonna meet at? That's the biggest factor right there. Is Floyd coming up to 160? Because Floyd has fought at 54. He's fought at 54. Can he come up to 160? And Canelo can make 160. So where would they meet at? That would be the biggest factor right there. So let's say they met at 160. Floyd has never fought at 160. We don't know how his power would translate at 160. We don't know if those cat-like reflexes will translate at 160. We don't know if his punch resistance would translate to 160. We don't know just if we get the best version of Floyd at 160. We don't know that. We don't know if this Floyd gas is faster. We have no clue. We literally are clueless to that notion. We are, because we just we've never seen it. We've never seen Floyd at that high, that high in the weight. The highest we seen him was 54. So does Floyd go to one? Does he go to one? So we'll just say that. We'll say we get the best version of Floyd. We get, we'll you know, for argument's sake, we'll say Floyd and Canelo meet at 160, and you know, you get the best version. You get the 168 version of Canelo, and you get the best version of Floyd. You know, the Floyd that fought Canelo, and they meet at 160. Now, all right, cool. We got that established. Now you begin to unpack it. How would the fight go? You just really get into the schematics of the fight, and how do you think that goes? How do you think that goes? I mean, you look at Floyd. Floyd has been clipped by far less formidable punchers than the Canelo Alvarez. It did. Zab Judah dropped him technically. That didn't get ruled in his favor, but he dropped him. He put Floyd on his ass. That glove touched the canvas. But they bullshitted him. Whatever. And not to mention, he was being outgunned by Zab as well. Fuck is you? He was being outgunned by Zab. Shane Mosley hurting. He's been clipped quite a few times. Nothing really detrimental, but he's been caught before, plenty of times. Not plenty, but often. When he was at it, when Floyd left that, when he became more cerebral and stepped away from the offensive juggernaut that he was. He became more cerebral, but even with him being cerebral, now granted, the adjustments that he was able to make after getting hit, that was tantamount. But the thing is this: they weren't the punchers that Canelo is. You know what I'm saying? If Canelo lands flush the way that Mosley and the way that Zab landed, it's gonna be disastrous because I mean, you got to think for Canelo to push Golovkin back. That's a big deal. For Canelo to push Golovkin back, stand in the pocket Mexican style with him. Nobody has done that thus far except Canelo, and he did it well. He pushed him back. He had Canelo on the back foot, like really rethinking his attack. Is Floyd going to be able to withstand that type of power? Now, granted, I will say this: when you talk about Floyd, like I said, this is cerebral. When you say Floyd Mayweather, you are talking about the highest level of intellect possibly in boxing history. I think he'd be a lot more defensively responsible in the fight with this version of Canelo. He'd be a lot more defensively responsible. A lot more. I'm talking nothing is hitting him. Nothing is hitting him. That's what I would like to think. Nothing is landing. Nothing is landing. He's a lot sharper on the jab because I mean he was, he was at a point where he was walking Canelo down in that fight. And he was walking Canelo down. Like Canelo was really gun shy on swinging. He put him on his back foot. But at 160, does he have that same type of power to push Canelo back? And Canelo is a lot sharper. He's a lot sharper with his head movement. He's a lot sharper with his counter punching. He couldn't see the punches coming with Floyd. He was harmless in there against Floyd. It was nothing he can do in there with Floyd. He couldn't see them punches coming or nothing. So he was just eating leather all night. Just on the defense. He was powerless. And Floyd was just picking this man apart. But that was a young Canelo. That was a young Canelo. That was a Canelo who wasn't this, whose feet wasn't even competent. You understand what I'm saying? That was a Canelo who just, he just wasn't nearly as polished. He wasn't nearly as polished, man. DT3 was talking about how you counter his counters. That's a hard thing to do. He's beatable if you counter his counters, you dig? But what happens if you can't counter them because you can't time you can't time him? He's a lot sharper with setting up his punches. This version of Canelo, he's a lot sharper, and he hits a lot harder, and he's a lot stronger. So I'm not too sure Floyd wins that fight, man. If we're talking prime for prime, I just, but then again, I'm not too sure, because it's like, what area is the ring? What area in the ring is Canelo gonna dominate? Because Floyd is he's a magician off the rope. He's incredible mid-ring. I think that the version of Floyd that fought Canelo, I think that Floyd is, he has enough pop in his punch, and he's so fucking cerebral that it's a fight. I think it's a good fight. But it's just, what are you gonna do when somebody is strategically coming forward? You know what I'm saying? They're closing distance, their hands are up, and they're moving their head. Every time every time you slip every time you miss a shot, he slips it, and within that instance, he's closing distance. And what happens if Canelo lands that money punch that Zab landed, or that Shane Mosley landed? I think people really need to get out of this mindset that Floyd, no fighter that Floyd has ever beat could beat him at their best. Manny Pacquiao at his best could have possibly beat Floyd. We'd still favor Floyd, but at his best, we talking the Manny Pacquiao that fought motherfucking Margarito and Cotto, and that was a killer. That was before Manny discovered Christianity. That was the Manny that was like, nah, man, I'm still out here. Every time I go out, when I fight, I'm still trying to slide that. Nah, that was a different Manny. That was a more assassin type Manny, you dig? But no, you would still have to favor Floyd just because of his style of fighting. But as far as Canelo goes, people get it fucked up that he already beat him, so it is what it is, and they disregard the fact that he beat him way early in his career. He was seasoned, most definitely, man. But it's levels to being seasoned. It's levels to that shit. Like Canelo looked nothing like he did. Canelo looked nothing in that fight like he does now. Nothing. It is a night and day difference between that version of Canelo and this version of Canelo. So I don't see Floyd being able to beat him if they met at 160 with this version of Canelo. We'll have a better understanding of it after Billy Joe Saunders. But this version of Canelo, who's a lot better at cutting off the ring, who's a lot sharper on the counters, the minute you launch a shot, he's calculated and he's launching something back. You're not going to be able to throw the same shot over and over and over again and not get punished for it. I think Floyd is a lot more calculated. This punch, he had a really good punch selection, man. He had Canelo guessing all night. All night. It was the left hook, it was the right uppercut, it was the jab, it was the straight, he had him guessing all night. But that Canelo was not nearly as polished as this Canelo is. This Canelo is something like, this Canelo was a generational talent. A really generational talent. So I just can't see a situation where Floyd from 154 beats a Canelo right now, because the strength and the power, it would just be too much. It would just be entirely too much, man. It would be too much. It would be too much, man. I think just and not to admit, like, because I thought Floyd could have beat Golovkin I thought Floyd could have beat Golovkin, man. But the thing is, Golovkin doesn't have the dimensions of a Canelo Alvarez. He's not, Golovkin is gonna be first all night. He's gonna be first all night. He's gonna walk you down and trap you on the rope and bang the body and really work off of the jab. He's gonna do that. I think something like that would, I think it will favor Floyd a little bit more because you know what you're getting. It's not really special effects, so he's really, really good at coming forward and pressing the action and working behind the jab and cutting the ring off and trapping you on the rope. And Floyd is very much so comfortable on the rope. But even then, that's a tall order. It's like, God damn, bro, like Golovkin is I would still edge Floyd in that fight, though. Nah. I'll say I think Floyd could win the fight. I'd say I think Floyd could win that fight. Edge, I don't think, it would once again depend on where they met at. Because he was talking about, I'll drop to 54 and fight him. They met at 54, all right. But at 60, man, nah, I'd have to stop. Like I said, I was a Golovkin hater at one point in time, so I'd have to stop hating and be like, all right, yeah, Golovkin. But Floyd is, I don't see a situation where he'd be able to take a well-placed shot from Canelo on the chin like it was nothing. This version of Canelo who can set the shot up. This version of Canelo who can find the target. Now, granted, he hasn't been in there with a fighter. You're not going to get in there with a fighter of Floyd's magnitude because Floyd is arguably top 5. The dude, and some people have him as the GOAT. And it's hard to argue against it. But my biggest thing is just, but he's never fought at 60 or 68. He's never fought that high. So how do you gauge it? You understand what I'm saying? Like, you're gonna get found, bro. You're gonna get caught. And do you have the respectable snap in the shot to keep him off you? Because I don't think people get it fucked up because it's like, damn, bro, like I'm saying not pound for pound, but prime for prime. This version of Canelo is at his best at 168 pounds. The best Floyd is at 54, 47. So it's not to denigrate him or nothing like that. It's not to be a dickhead about it or be like a Floyd hater. But you just gotta. It's hard to ignore that fact. 68 and not like comfortably at 68. You know what I'm saying? Knockouts at 68 or a knockout at 68 and a destruction of a sitting world champion at 68. And when we see after Billy Joe Saunders, we'll have a better understanding of him. So I'd have to go with Canelo, and as far as prime for prime is concerned, man, because it's just, you got to look at the size difference, you got to look at the power difference, and Floyd isn't going to be able to have the level of success that he had against a more polished Canelo, because Canelo is, he's sharper now. He's way sharper. He's way sharper. He's sharper. He's slicker now. He's better on his feet. You're not going to be able to feint him out of position as easy as you. No, that's just not going to happen. It could happen if we go on prime for prime, but I don't see it happening, me personally. It would just be a lot more to deal with for a cat like Floyd. And because Canelo is he's just big. He's a bulldog, man, and his hand speed is fast, and I don't think he can match Floyd in counterpunching. I think Floyd was a lot sharper of a counterpuncher than Canelo. I do. But once again, it's the size factor. It's the size factor, man. I think, when you look at Floyd was, his step back right hand was just, and it's the same with Canelo. But he was also good at punching in between combinations. He was really good at that. He did that on Canelo as well. And his timing. He had speed and timing. He was able to time Canelo, get a shot off. Canelo launched something back. He's out of the, he's out of range, and he's launching something off of that. It's just like, dude, how do you deal with? I think Canelo, Floyd has him as far as skill is concerned. I think he has him beat as far as skill is concerned, but we have to take power and size and strength into the equation. And I think, nigga, it's like real life. Nigga. I think once you do that, you realize I don't see Floyd can Floyd withstand that type of power once he lands. He will have to land. I think he's gonna have to really be calculated in landing because Floyd is that slick in there. But I can't ignore him getting rocked, getting his bells rang by motherfucking Mosley and Zab. I can't get past that. So prime for prime, I'd have to go with Canelo. I gotta go with Canelo. That's just entirely because Canelo. If this was if we talking the bet, Canelo's prime was at 160. That's a different ball game. But Canelo right now, the Canelo that's at 168 pounds, that's just too much size, man. It's too much size, and it's not just that it's the size; it's the skill. I think Canelo isn't as polished as Floyd as just a tactician. Even though, they have similarities in their style. I mean, Canelo works well off of the rope as well. He works well at mid-ring. Floyd has far better feet than Canelo. They both set traps well. They're both slick, but it's just the size advantage, and Canelo is just a little too big for Floyd, man. But let me know if I'm burnt the fuck out or if I'm on to something. I'm about to run in here and get my baby, y'all. Peace.